At exactly 03:17 hours on July 7, 2026, the fragile silence over the Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile-wide maritime needle through which 1/5 of the world's oil and gas had once freely flowed, was shattered in a way that no ceasefire document, no memorandum of understanding, no diplomatic channel could immediately contain. The Marshall Islands flagged LNG tanker Rekayyat, 280 meters of steel and pressurized liquefied natural gas, was transiting the internationally recognized navigation lane when the first projectile struck her port quarter without warning. Fire erupted almost instantly in the engine room. The crew transmitted a Mayday signal on Channel 16. Their voices cut through with the raw acoustics of terror. Within the same 11-minute window, the Saudi Arabia-flagged supertanker Wedyan, carrying 2 million barrels of crude, reported impacts from at least 2 drone strikes. Then the Liberian-registered MT Cyprus Prosperity, still holding course westbound through the narrow corridor, was hit by a cruise missile variant that detonated above the waterline and sent a plume of black smoke, visible from satellite imagery 2 hours later. 3 ships, 3 sovereign flags, 3 separate weapon profiles, drone, projectile, and cruise missile, delivered with the choreographic precision of an operation planned weeks in advance. This was not harassment. This was not a warning shot. This was a coordinated multi-vector ambush designed to make one thing absolutely clear. The Islamic Republic of Iran still held the gate. The Joint Maritime Information Center, the U.S.-led naval intelligence clearinghouse positioned aboard the USS Mount Whitney in the Gulf of Oman, had the full tactical picture within 7 minutes. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye early warning aircraft, orbiting at 25,000 feet above the Gulf, relayed the combat data link through Link 16 to the combat information centers of every American surface combatant within 300 nautical miles. The Aegis battle management system aboard the USS Bulkley, a Flight 2A Arleigh Burke destroyer on forward patrol station, cross-referenced the acoustic signature profile of the IRGC boat swarm that had executed the attack. Blade Runner-class fast attack craft operating in a Wolfpack configuration of 8 to 12 vessels, using the background noise of commercial traffic as acoustic cover. They had executed the attack and scattered back into Iranian coastal shallows before the 3rd ship had finished transmitting her distress call. The United States Navy watched every second of it. In Washington, the National Security Council convened inside 45 minutes. The Pentagon's decision calculus was immediate and brutal in its simplicity. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, the fragile ceasefire that had ended months of open warfare, contained a single cardinal clause: no attacks on commercial shipping. Iran had just violated it 3 times in 90 minutes. The Treasury Department, acting with unusual speed, revoked the general license authorizing Iranian oil exports before the sun rose over the Potomac. That single administrative action, executed without fanfare, removed the one economic lifeline Tehran had gained from the stand-down agreement. It was the political trigger for what came next. At 17:39 hours Eastern Time, U.S. Central Command released a statement that felt less like a press release and more like a gauntlet. U.S. Central Command forces have begun launching a series of powerful strikes against Iran to impose heavy costs for targeting and attacking commercial shipping, crewed by innocent civilians in an international waterway. 5,000 miles away, the flight decks of USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Carl Vinson erupted with activity. F/A, 18F, Super Hornets from VFA-41 and VFA-14 were slung off catapults in rapid succession, their AN/APG 79 AESA radars already locking terminal waypoints before they cleared the carrier's wake. EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft from VAQ-135 followed, their ALQ-99 jamming pods already calibrating against the specific frequency bands of Iranian Bavar 373 and HQ-9 surface-to-air missile radars positioned along the southern coast. What hit Iran in the next 4 hours was not a punitive pinprick. It was a methodical, pre-planned demolition. CENTCOM confirmed the destruction of over 80 targets struck with precision-guided munitions. The target list read, like a complete dismantlement of Iran's anti-access/area denial architecture in the southern theater. Iranian air defense nodes, command and control communication relays, coastal surveillance radar installations capable of targeting ships in the strait, anti-ship cruise missile launch batteries on Qeshm Island and along the Hormuzgan coast, drone launch and storage facilities, and, most symbolically devastating, more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fast attack boats destroyed either at their moorings or while attempting to reposition. 6 months of IRGC maritime harassment capability eliminated in a single night. Iranian state broadcaster IRIB reported 13 separate explosions, 6 in the vicinity of Qeshm Island, 7 near Tarovi in Sirik County. The lights over southern Iran flickered and went dark. But here is what every armchair strategist missed in the immediate aftermath of those 80 strikes. Iran was not finished, not even close. The IRGC's Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, the unified command structure that controls Iran's integrated fires, had anticipated an American retaliation. They had prepared a response matrix that had nothing to do with tankers or the strait itself. They aimed for the American nerve centers scattered across the Gulf. The bases, the headquarters buildings, the fuel tanks, the early warning radars that the United States had spent decades building into a defensive shell around its Fifth Fleet. At 0600 hours on July 9th, air raid sirens sounded across the island kingdom of Bahrain, not once, but 3 times in rapid succession. Bahrain is not incidental geography. Bahrain houses naval support activity. Bahrain, the forward headquarters of the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, the operational command authority for every American warship between the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca. The Iranians were not shooting at targets of opportunity. They were shooting at the house. The drone and missile barrage that Iran launched in a 24-hour window targeted installations across Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan simultaneously. The Iranian army announced strikes on a Patriot missile interceptor system in Kuwait, an early warning radar installation in Qatar, and aviation fuel storage tanks at Bahrain's Sheikh Issa Air Base, using what they described as a large number of various types of kamikaze attack drones. Jordan reported the interception of 8 Iranian ballistic missiles fired at a U.S. military base on its territory, executed by their own Patriot PAC-3 batteries in a textbook layered defense engagement. In Kuwait, the military confirmed that falling debris from an intercepted barrage wounded 1 soldier and caused structural damage near Camp Arifjan, headquarters of the U.S. Army Central Command. The message embedded in Iran's targeting choices was unmistakable. We can reach every American soldier, every American sailor, from the eastern Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean basin. The Patriot batteries and the Aegis-equipped cruisers worked through the night. The Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense System deployed to Qatar engaged the higher-altitude ballistic trajectories, while THAAD's X-band TPY-2 radar queuing data was automatically shared via the integrated air and missile defense architecture with every interceptor battery in the theater. The multi-layered approach worked. Most of the Iranian fire was absorbed. But most is not all. And every salvo that forced a Patriot intercept cost the United States tens of millions of dollars in interceptor missiles and burned down finite munition stocks that take months to replenish. Iran understands this mathematics intimately. They were not trying to win with missiles. They were trying to impose cost. Simultaneously, while the Gulf was lighting up, the world's attention was split. At the NATO Summit in Ankara, Turkey, President Donald Trump was sitting across from 32 allied heads of state, and his posture communicated zero ambiguity. Trump had already described the ceasefire as a waste of time and declared, "As far as I'm concerned, it's over." He told allied leaders, in terms blunt enough to unsettle even his closest partners, that Europe had failed to share the burden of defending freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, and that the United States was carrying the entirety of the kinetic load, while European capitals issued political rhetoric. The room at the Beştepe presidential compound in Ankara was quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet, when someone says out loud what everyone had been carefully not saying. NATO's Article 5 architecture was not designed for a scenario in which the dominant military power is actively fighting a war while simultaneously berating its partners for watching. On July 9th, 2026, CENTCOM launched its second major wave. Not a sequel, a hammer. U.S. officials told reporters that the second round of strikes was 4 to 5 times larger in scope and destructive yield than the 80 targets hit on July 7th. 90 Iranian military targets were struck in a single coordinated operation. The target list expanded dramatically. Air defense systems that had survived the first wave, coastal surveillance assets repositioned after the initial strikes, missile and drone storage infrastructure deep inside Hormozgan province, naval logistics and fuel supply nodes, and military command infrastructure along Iran's entire southern coastline. Explosions were reported in Bandar Abbas, Iran's largest port and primary naval base on the Gulf, in Bushehr, home to Iran's nuclear power complex, in Qeshm Island again, and across sites in Sirik County. At least 14 Iranians were killed and 78 wounded, according to Iran's own health ministry, the majority of whom were members of the armed forces. Here is the number that tells you everything about what this week meant to the global economy. On July 9, 2026, 0 large commercial vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz via the internationally coordinated route. 0. The previous day, 34 vessels had made it through, representing 38% of the pre-war normal traffic flow. In June 2025, more than 3,100 ships passed through the strait in a single month. 1 year later, during the most intense week of fighting, the number approached 0. The Chabahar port on Iran's eastern coast, a key Indian-backed transshipment node, was closed. War risk insurance premiums, already elevated, spiked to levels that made most commercial operators simply hold position and wait. Brent crude stabilized near $76 to $77 per barrel as markets tried to absorb the repricing of a potentially infinite disruption to global energy supply chains. Tried and largely failed. Layered beneath all of this was a succession crisis that the international press had not yet fully grasped. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the man who had governed the Islamic Republic with an iron theocratic fist for nearly 37 years, had been killed in the initial US and Israeli strikes in February. His son and designated successor, Mojtaba Khamenei, was formally proclaimed Supreme Leader by the Assembly of Experts on March 8, 2026. But as of July 9th, through 5 days of his father's state funeral, processions that moved from Tehran to Najaf and Karbala, then to the Imam Reza Shrine in Mashhad, drawing more than 100 nations' attendance and hundreds of thousands of mourners chanting for the deaths of Trump and Netanyahu, Mojtaba had not made a single verified public appearance. His advisors attributed this absence to injuries and ongoing Israeli threats against the new leader's life. The succession was not consolidated. The command authority in Tehran was operating in a gray zone, with senior clerics issuing statements and the IRGC executing operations, but no legitimate political principle visible and functional at the apex of the system. A military machine at war, with its new commander nowhere to be seen. A scenario that should unsettle every security analyst on the planet. Now ask yourself this: what would you do sitting inside the IRGC's Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, with your supreme leader hidden from public view, your naval boats burning in the strait, your air defense nodes demolished across the southern coast, and a US carrier strike group launching relentlessly from the Gulf of Oman, while simultaneously Russia is firing 600 drones and ballistic missiles at Kyiv, and the Secretary General of NATO is standing at a podium in Ankara, listening to the American president explain why the ceasefire was a mistake? Do you de-escalate and risk appearing domestically broken? Or do you escalate and risk triggering the kind of American response that buries entire command structures? Comment 1 if you believe Iran has a credible exit strategy. Comment 2 if you believe this ends in direct, full-scale war before August. The world has reached a genuinely dangerous inflection point. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding is functionally dead. Trump has said so directly. Iran has said so through action. A mid-August deadline for ceasefire negotiators, still nominally being worked by Oman and Pakistan as intermediaries, now seems like a line on a map that neither side is moving toward. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's traded oil and gas must flow, is a combat zone. The U.S. Navy is enforcing freedom of navigation through kinetic strikes on a sovereign nation's military infrastructure. Iran is hitting American bases across 4 countries simultaneously. The Fifth Fleet's headquarters absorbed sirens 3 times in a single night. And somewhere in a secure location in Iran, the new Supreme Leader has not been seen in public for weeks. This is not a regional skirmish. This is the architecture of a larger war being built in real time, one strike wave at a time. The Strait of Hormuz was already the world's most strategically critical 21 miles of water before a single missile was fired. It is now the most dangerous. And the lesson that should burn itself into the consciousness of every global leader watching this unfold is this. When a great power and a regime with nothing left to lose collide over a choke point that the entire global economy depends on, the concept of limited conflict begins to dissolve. The US possesses the overwhelming firepower. Iran possesses the geography, the patience, and the institutional willingness to absorb catastrophic damage in pursuit of regime survival. Peace is not maintained through memoranda signed in Islamabad. It is maintained through either total military defeat of one side, or through the credible, visible threat of consequences so severe that neither party chooses the next escalation. This week demonstrated that we are no longer in that second category. The calculus has shifted, the machines are running, and the next 72 hours in the Strait of Hormuz will determine whether the world's energy markets and the economies built on them enter a sustained crisis that makes every previous supply shock look manageable. Stay sharp, stay informed, because what happens in those 21 miles of water will not stay there.